And welcome to our CNN election special. We are about to hear from the final five, all the presidential candidates still in contention for the nation's highest office. The Republican governor of Ohio, John Kasich, joins us now. Thanks very much for starting us off tonight. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
Let's talk about AIPAC, a speech today there. You said there is not any prospect for peace until the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, and Hezbollah, in your words, take real steps to live peacefully. They also have to recognize Israel as a Jewish state. That doesn't sound like there's really a chance for peace, in your opinion? Because, I mean, Hezbollah, Hamas,
well, you know,
recognizing
Anderson,
Israel?
Why are we living in a dream world until they recognize Israel's right to exist? How could you ever have a two-state solution? I mean, you know, this is pretty clear. You know, when the Prime Minister came here, talked about the Iran deal, he talked about the fundamental change that he thought they should have exhibited before we signed an agreement. I found it to be pretty compelling.
Is there anything you could do as president to move Hezbollah, to move Hamas, to move the Palestinian Authority in that direction?
Well, there's always a way in which you would talk back channels, and then we do have some limited leverage over the Palestinian Authority. But look, the Palestinian Authority has been, you know, they've been feeding a lot of hatred for, 30, 40, 50 years, and teaching their kids about suicide killers and all these other crazy things. So, I mean, are there back channels in which you can say, look, a two-state solution is possible, but there's just some preconditions. You don't ever go to an event or a negotiation where you don't have some sense of how it's going to work out, because then it becomes an experience in nothing but frustration, and that's not where you want to be.
In the speech today, you also said we cannot be neutral in defending our allies, reference no doubt to Donald Trump, who talked about being neutral in negotiations. Would Donald Trump be a staunch enough ally of Israel?
Well, you ask him, okay? I can just tell you about me. 35 years I've supported Israel. But it's not just Israel. You know, we clearly have to make sure we strengthen NATO. We have to make sure that Putin understands that we will arm the Ukrainians so they can fight for freedom, with providing them with the lethal defensive equipment that they need. We need to make it clear to the Chinese what we expect from them. And it doesn't mean we have to rattle sabers. We should not get involved in civil wars. But clearly, you know, when it comes to ISIS, we have to destroy ISIS with a coalition of the Arabs and also the Europeans led by us. I mean, these are simple things, really.
What about military aid to Israel? When you were the senior Republican on the House Budget Committee, you proposed cuts to a lot of federal programs, freezing military aid to Israel. Israel currently receives, I think, about $3 billion in aid. Would that still be on the table? Would that be an area to cut, or do you think?
We still have to continue to make sure that Israel has military superiority, particularly in the air. And of course, I was a supporter of the Iron Dome, which is really critical in early days, the Arrow program. No, I think that we don't want to ever put them in a position of where they don't have superiority.
So no cuts to Israel
attack.
On military aid?
Well, I don't see any reason to do that or to say that today. We want to make sure that they're strong and that they're the strongest in the region.
You also said today Jerusalem is the eternal capital of Israel. That's your quote. The last three Republican presidents, though, did not move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, did not recognize Jerusalem as the capital. Why were they wrong?
Well, take the statement for what it is. It is the eternal capital of Israel, Jerusalem.
Should the embassy be there? The US
well,
embassy?
I would prefer that, but I think we have other things we have to do up front, which is to make sure they have security, back channels to the Palestinians. And, you know, I'm told today that there's some progress with the Palestinians in terms of keeping some of the lid on the violence. I mean, the stabbings have been terrible, but perhaps there are still some things that they do to try to keep a lid on the situation. My whole point, Anderson, as regard Israel and the whole Middle East, is we look for stability. We're not going to have any long-term peace. It's a matter of getting through each day with a lid on things over there. So we can make some more progress, but it's tough right now.
Ted Cruz has talked about acknowledging Jerusalem as the capital on day one, moving the embassy there. You're saying that's a mistake?
No, I'm just saying let's take one thing at a time. You know, look,
Does it impact the peace process
well,
if you do that?
Look, there's some things that you say that you know are just going to get you nowhere. But nobody made a stronger speech today about my support over all of my professional career for Israel and what I think we need to do vis-a-vis the Palestinians, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran. I called for the suspension of the Iran nuclear agreement because of their ballistic missile violations and basically violating the spirit of the agreement. But look, Anderson, it's easy to make a lot of statements, but when you have a lot of experience in this matter, which I had, serving 18 years on the Armed Services Committee and then being in the Pentagon after 9/11 at the request of Secretary Rumsfeld to help solve some of their problems over there, You learn to choose your words carefully, and I think today I was very strong in that speech. I received an overwhelming response from the beginning and all the way through that talk, and I think I've said enough at this point.
You have a lot of government experience. Donald Trump trumpets his business experience making.
I had that too.
Making deals. What is the difference between? I mean, is experience in business, making deals in business, does it transfer to statesmanship? Does it transfer between making deals between countries, or is that a whole other?
Well, that's a good question because, frankly, when you're a politician, people wonder if you can transfer it to business. I did. I had good success when I worked as a banker and as a board member. Secondly, in business, there's not an automatic ability to understand politics. It's not the same. Some people can make the transition.
Is it easier to make deals in business, or are there a lot more kind of moving? I mean, you're dealing with countries, you're dealing with a lot of factors.
Yeah, I think it is more complicated, more nuanced, but I had great success in terms of business agreements and, of course, the balanced budget, which I was able to do with the Clinton administration, in addition to welfare reform and, by the way, massive reform of the Pentagon. I was involved in some of the most significant things there, and then in Ohio. But I have to say that the time I was in business, the almost 10 years I was out, was absolutely invaluable to me to understand in a real way what moves the economy, but it's back and forth. Look, I'm the only one that has both the legislative and the executive and the business experience in the race.
You talked about the Pentagon. Donald Trump said to CNN today it's time to rethink NATO because it costs too much, that NATO partners should be ponying up more. Does that make any sense?
No. We're going to have to strengthen NATO. In fact, NATO has to be stronger, not only vis-a-vis Putin and what could happen over there in Central and Eastern Europe, but at the same time, we want our allies to be able to share intelligence with us. We need to come closer together. And frankly, they have to be part of the coalition to be able to destroy ISIS, along with the Muslim Arabs.
Is it reckless, then, of a potential leader to talk about?
I would never speak that way because we need NATO. NATO is important. Now, we all wish they would do more.
So you're saying it sends a wrong message to say that kind of thing?
Well, I don't think anybody's paying that much attention right now. But as a leader of this country, you want to be very careful, and I wouldn't say that now. Because, Anderson, look, it's cooperation on the intelligence side. It's cooperation, frankly, on the ability to put coalitions together, to work against Iran if they violate the agreement. There's so many reasons that which we need to have stronger relationships around the world, and not just with NATO. We have to strengthen our relationship with some of our allies in the Middle East, particularly the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Gulf states, the Saudis. That's a tricky little situation there. Now, I'll tell you another place we have to keep our eye on that's really valuable, and that's Turkey. Mm-hmm. And, now the talk with...
There's a suicide bombing there.
Well, I know that, and they're blaming that on ISIS. But the situation is, in Europe now, they're trying to work a deal both with most particularly Turkey to try to deal with the problem of the migrants, the refugees. What's interesting is they're now beginning to talk about perhaps this is an opening for Turkey to get in the EU. We need to pull Turkey to the west. We don't need Turkey to go to the east. They are a gateway to what we need to do in the Middle East.
You're talking about ISIS. You said today one of the pillars of your presidency would be to keep ISIS out of Libya. Would you actually use U.S. troops to do that?
No. First of all, I have to tell you that was a major mistake of the administration and Hillary. We should have let Gaddafi stay there. He was cooperating with us. And by knocking him out, we turned this into the Wild West. There's about 6 or 7 cities in Libya that we have to pay attention to. We could use some air power, but I would not be for going on the ground in Libya. We can support people that want to deal with the situation there. But when it relates to ISIS in both Iraq and also in Syria, it's going to be necessary to do it. There was another
so you're saying Libya is worse now than it was under Gaddafi? You would have kept Gaddafi in power.
Listen, anytime you mess in a civil war, anytime you start getting in the middle of these kind of problems directly, which is what we did, you create problems. And
so it was a mistake to overthrow Gaddafi?
It was a terrible mistake, and it was Hillary that really pushed it. And let me tell you, when I was a very young congressman, we had troops in Lebanon in the middle of that civil war.
Ronald Reagan tried to knock out Gaddafi.
Well, let's stay on one thing here. In Lebanon, when they wanted to keep the troops there, and President Reagan actually did, I said, no, civil wars are bad, and it was quick. It was soon after that when we withdrew our troops because of the bombing in the barracks. But Reagan sent a message to Gaddafi basically with a missile. He didn't put troops on the ground, and it got Gaddafi's attention, and Gaddafi, really disarmed his nuclear operation. One other thing I wanted to tell you that I pointed out today that may have been lost. And I've been talking about giving the kind of support that we need to the people in Afghanistan, but I don't want to stay there forever. give them the support, give them the air power that they need, let them be able to manage on the ground and in the air, but the United States should not be in Afghanistan for the rest of our lives.
Can the U.S. affect change in Afghanistan without having a presence on the ground?
Well, I think there's a way in which we could, in fact, be able to deal with trouble when they pop up, but to have a huge troop presence there for a very long time, I don't think makes sense.
Force, special forces, something like that.
Yeah, but you don't want to set a timeline. That's another big mistake. So,
which is something President Obama did early on.
Yeah, and then he had to change the timeline, and you send a message. Okay, well, let's wait them out. It's just not smart. That's why you have to understand foreign policy and how to conduct it, and how to leverage the support you have, and how do you bring people in and manage these
Let's talk about Cuba then. President Obama is there today. You've been critical of the opening to Cuba. Starwood, the company, Airbnb, are now going to the island because of the president's new policy. Under your presidency, would companies like that be forced out?
I'm not for doing any more to advance anything in Cuba until they... Look, we can't even meet with these ladies who have been marching every single Sunday to ask for human rights and people to be released from prison.
Who have been in prison.
Yes. And so what happens, the president hasn't even touched ground, and Castro's already criticizing the United States. The president says, well, that means we're communicating
But has
better.
that ship sailed? I mean, businesses going in under your presidency, would you
I don't want to expand anymore. I'd have to think about exactly what I would do. But let me say one other thing, Anderson. We talk about NATO. It is absolutely critical that the president be work with NATO now, so that if Iran does violate that nuclear deal that he put together, that we put the sanctions back on. You know, some people say rip it up right now. Well, I've called for a freeze on the nuclear deal because of the ballistic missile violations and violating the spirit of the deal. But if they in fact violate the deal in principle, we wouldn't have to want to do this alone. We'd want to do this with the Europeans. And you know what the problem gets to be? Money. People go over, they make money, and then time comes to take action, and we put money ahead of what we know is security.
When I asked you about NATO and Trump, you essentially kind of said, look, as leader, you wouldn't say that kind of thing.
I'm not saying it now.
Right. And you've been very careful not to directly attack Donald Trump. You're
look, he's just dead wrong on NATO. He's dead wrong on what he said on these things.
Do you think he's ready to be leader of the free world?
Look, that's up to the people to decide. That gets to be personal about my feelings about his competence. Just look at his statements, and I'm telling you what I think about it. And to say that we need to withdraw from NATO, we're not going to trade.
He's not saying withdraw. He's saying lower.
What does that mean? What we need to do is we need to have deeper relations. I mean, imagine that when the folks at Charlie were murdered, the magazine, they had a service, 1 million people in Paris. We didn't even send anybody. I mean, what are we thinking? I mean, how do we diss an ally like Israel, not even have the president meet with the prime minister? These are or a red line, or dumping Gaddafi out. I mean, these are things that really sow confusion in the minds of not only our friends, but in the minds of our enemies.
Let's talk here immigration. Arizona votes tomorrow, as you no doubt know. Major issue there, obviously, immigration. The last debate, you said you could pass a bill to put undocumented immigrants on a path to legalization in your first 100 days in office, which really puts you at odds with the two remaining Republican presidential
candidates. I'm at odds with them on a number of issues.
But closer to Hillary Clinton than you are to the Republicans.
Well, look, Anderson, Ronald Reagan himself tried to solve this problem. We never finished the border. My position's been clear. You finish the border, no one comes in, you go, I don't want to hear any excuses, you're going back. If you try to sneak in. A guest worker program, okay, you come in, work, you go back, and for the 11.5 million who are here, if they have not committed a crime since they've been here, they'll pay back taxes, a fine, probably be delayed in terms of when they can get benefits, and then they can be legalized and not citizens. The notion that we're going to go into homes and we're going to grab people out of their homes with their kids on the front porch crying. Are you kidding me? This isn't going to happen in America.
There's not going to be a deportation force, no matter what.
Well, look,
no matter what Trump or others say.
Well, it's never happened, and they quote these things that are just not accurate. I mean, look, if you have a deportation order, you're going to have to leave. That's the law in America. But the idea that we're going to go around in the neighborhoods picking these people up is just not. First of all, it's not practical, and secondly, that's not the way we behave. What are we going to do? Just yank them out, handcuff them and put them in a car, and their kids are there, or they're breaking up families? Come on, that's not. And I didn't say it could pass in 100 days. I will get them a plan in 100 days. coupled with the economic changes I want on tax cuts and balanced budgets and common sense regulatory reform.
There's a new CNN poll out tonight. Good news and bad news for you. The good news, do you like good news first or bad news first?
Whatever you want, Anderson.
All right.
You choose.
I'm a bad news first guy, but
okay.
I'm a catastrophist. But I'll give you the good news first. You're the only Republican that beats Hillary Clinton in a head-to-head matchup, 51% to 45%. 70% of Republicans, though, think you should drop out because it's impossible for you to win enough delegates to be the party's nominee.
Well, I don't think anybody's going to have enough delegates to win the nomination before the convention.
No matter what, this goes to the convention.
Yeah, this is going to go to the convention. Look, if I hadn't won Ohio, if I had dropped out and Trump had won Ohio, he'd be the nominee. But he didn't.
So those 70% of Republicans who say you should drop out, you say?
Well, I don't know who they are. And look, all these polls, I mean, people have been telling me all along what the polls are, and the pundits tell me what's going to happen, and they've never been right yet. I think God created pundits to make astrologers look accurate, to tell you the truth. But,
and to fill cable news.
But look, let me just tell you that I'm moving forward because I have the skill, the experience, the vision, and the record to fix the country. That, like, really matters. And then we're going to get to a convention, and delegates are going to think about two things. Who can win? I'm the only one that can win a general election. And number two, who can be president? Well, I have the experience to do it.
Let me ask you a couple of questions on that. Last week, you had Governor Romney campaigning with you in Ohio, didn't endorse you, but urging people to vote in Ohio for you, a proponent of strategic voting. In Utah and Arizona, he's put out this robocall. I just want to play it for you and get you to talk about it.
Hello, this is Mitt Romney, and I'm calling to ask you to join me in supporting Ted Cruz for president this Tuesday in the Utah Republican caucuses. This is the time for Republicans across the spectrum to unite behind Ted. He is the only Republican candidate who can defeat Donald Trump. And at this point, a vote for John Kasich is a vote for Donald Trump.
Campaigning for you last week in Ohio. Does it make any sense?
Well, of course it doesn't. I mean, how do you come out one week and say he's got a great record and then the next week? But look, you know, if he says that a vote for somebody else is, you know, a vote for Trump or whatever, you just read the polls. I'm the only one that wins the general. I mean, what are we thinking about? I don't get this. Are we thinking about just what happens in a Republican primary? We have to win the general election. We have to beat Hillary, and we have to have somebody that has both domestic and foreign policy experience, of which I have.
Today, Senator Ted Cruz, and he's going to be out here shortly, said if you weren't in the race, he could get enough delegates to win the nomination, and he suggested that you're staying in as an audition to be Trump's vice president. What do you say to Cruz?
Well, first of all, there is zero chance that I would be vice president with either of them. And secondly, no chance. Zero. Below zero, actually. And secondly...
You don't want it? Wouldn't be interested?
Not interested. Not interested. And secondly, Anderson, if I hadn't won Ohio, Trump would be the nominee right now. People forget that. They wanted me to get out and get behind Marco. Great guy, by the way. I didn't. And you know what? Let me just tell you, my message of hope, my message of how we can fix the problems of income insecurity, how we can fix the problem of a lack of wage increases, and what's going to happen to our children is a vital message. So Cruz, it's important to be out there, for me to be out there, to have this voice and the voice of my team heard across the country.
So when Cruz calls you a spoiler candidate, you say?
That's name calling. That's name calling. Don't name call.
John Boehner, former House Speaker, good friend of yours going back to your days in Congress, he said, quote, if we don't have a nominee who can win on the first ballot, talking about at a convention, I'm for none of the above. They all had a chance to win. None of them won. I'm for Paul Ryan to be our nomination. To our nominee. Should
he walked that statement back?
Should it be?
He said he was for me.
He did?
Yeah.
Should the nomination be limited to somebody who ran?
I'm not going to tell the delegates what to do on this. I mean, I've been to a convention in 1976 when Ronald Reagan, by the way, took on an incumbent president by the name of Gerald Ford. We got together. The delegates were extremely serious, as they always will be. And they will measure, because they're going to be political types, you know, local party officials, former members of Congress, members of the legislature. They will go try to decide who can win in the fall and who can be president. Today, when we talk about all this process, it's all like about who's going to be nominated. We shouldn't forget the most important thing. Who can lead this country?
Finally, at the convention, Donald Trump has said there could be riots if he's not made the nominee. You're the governor of Ohio. This would happen under your watch. Are you planning to call out the Ohio National Guard, just in case?
We always manage events where we think there could be problem as best we can. But that kind of language is not acceptable. And in addition to that...
not acceptable for a leader to make?
Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of language should a leader say? That
Well, you know what? I went to the convention. I gave it the best I could, and I didn't win. And, you know, and God bless everybody here, and God bless America. And let's get behind a person that won, and let's move forward and win the White House.
Do you think that encourages people to riot, encourages people to act?
Well, I don't think that kind of language is good. I mean, you don't think it is. I know you don't think it is. So either do I. Either do people when they hear it. It's not something, it's not a head shake. We're running for President of the United States of America to be the leader of the world, the commander-in-chief, and lead this country forward. And we have to be better than that kind of language.
Governor John Kasich, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Always a pleasure.
Okay,
Appreciate
Anderson,
it.
thank you.
We're going to hear from Donald Trump shortly, but next it is Senator Ted Cruz's turn. Much more of our election special, the final five, ahead.